All right, so it looks like Sean Diddy Combs is hoping that the third time is a charm as it relates to him getting out on bail. He's got another bail hearing coming up on Friday, and prosecutors are arguing that he does not have a right to get out, that the judge should deny him bail, and obviously the defense they're arguing that he should get out. And so we're going to look at the arguments on both sides, and in the end, I'll give you my opinion on how I see this thing playing out. But let me know your thoughts. Do you think that the government is correct in saying that he should remain in custody until he has trial, or is his detention a violation of his constitutional rights and he should be out? I mean, at the end of the day, he is presumed innocent, right? He's innocent unless and until he's proven guilty. And so therefore he should be out. Well, we're going to see. So the defense, in saying that he should be released, has put together yet another relatively robust bail package. I mean, this is something that the average person would not obviously be able to do. We got the $50 million that's backed by $48 million in equity from one of his properties. He's proposing 24/7, so round the clock security, private security that's going to be paid for by him, right? So it's not going to be the government's expense. Routine drug testing, restricted visitations, no phone, no internet. So he's really trying to make this an attractive proposal to the judge, but the prosecution's not buying it, and we'll see if, this time around that's going to be helpful to him. The defense is also arguing that basically the government's case against Diddy is quote unquote thin, and it seems to be centered around an attack on who's named as victim number one, who we know is Cassie Ventura. It's aimed as an attack on her credibility, and they talk about how the civil lawsuit ended up getting filed. So we all know that she ended up filing a lawsuit against him that was settled pretty quickly. But before that was even filed, basically what she had done was she had her lawyers reach out to Diddy's lawyers, basically saying, hey, I'm writing a book. It's going to be an expose. It's going to be a tell-all about the details of our relationship. It's going to be juicy. It's going to be salacious. And if you want this, to not come out, if you don't want this book to see the light of day, then you got to pay me $30 million, right? For exclusive book rights. And so typically if somebody's purchasing rights to literature or material, whether that's a video or a book or, pictures, then they're purchasing those rights so that they can put it out and make a profit off of it versus other distributors trying to make a profit on it. But in this situation, what she was trying to say is, hey, if you don't want this to see the light of day, then you can pay for exclusive rights and then nobody ever has to see it, right? Well, that proposal was rejected. So what the defense is saying is, she was basically just trying to extort money out of Diddy. And when that wasn't successful, then she used the Adult Survivors Act. Anything relating to, physical abuse, whether that's assault or battery or anything like that, the statute of limitations had already run because these things happened years ago. But what the defense attorneys are saying is that she basically used a loophole and, proposed for the very first time allegations of sexual abuse. If you remember, the statute of limitations on these acts had already run, but there was an open window for people to file these type of lawsuits and take advantage of the Adult Survivors Act. What the defense is saying is their relationship ended in 2018. 5 years later, in 2023, she's bringing up sexual abuse allegations for the very first time. What they're trying to say is that, hey, we need to question the legitimacy of these claims, because if they were legitimate, why didn't she raise them back then? And it's an interesting argument. It's an interesting defense, but most plaintiffs' attorneys for sexual abuse survivors and even prosecutors will make the argument, and rightfully so, that there are many reasons why a person wouldn't just directly come out and make these abuse allegations. People can have been legitimately assaulted and, sit on the information for many years until, they develop the courage or whatever ends up happening for them to come out and say it. So that can be evidence of a lie or lack of credibility, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But that's at least the way the defense is spinning it. So Cassie and her lawyers offered Diddy and his team an opportunity to settle before the lawsuit got filed. Obviously, that didn't happen. And so they filed their lawsuit, and the lawsuit was quickly settled and closed out. Well, the defense argues that just days after this settlement was reached, that's when the government's investigation began. And ultimately, when they decided to file criminal charges, that the allegations were basically recycled allegations from Cassie's civil lawsuit. But the difference is, in that civil case, she ultimately didn't have to testify to anything, and I think that the defense is painting that as basically a business decision. It wasn't like Puff had to admit the allegations in order to settle. It's just, hey, I'm paying this, this is how I'm making it go away. But in a criminal case, she's ultimately going to have to take the stand and testify as to what the government is alleging. And what the defense position is, hey, she's going to say all these things, but there is documentary evidence, there's correspondence that directly refutes what her position is. So again, they're basically giving the indication that they're going to be able to rip her apart on cross-examination through their questioning and through the presentation of objective documentary and correspondence evidence. And interestingly enough, the way that the defense characterizes the relationship, they say, hey, it was toxic, right? There was cheating going on. There was instances of domestic violence, and all of those are bad things, but at the end of the day, there was no sex trafficking. And that's what this defense is based on. At the end of the day, while we've seen that CNN tape, at the end of the day, this is not a domestic violence case. And so, yeah, there is some relevance to that video. The government is arguing that this is just evidence of the force and power and control that Puff had over Cassie. But basically the defense is trying to spin this as, hey, that's all this was. This was just domestic violence and there was no sex trafficking at all. And this wasn't really a big deal in these moving papers, but the defense did mention the issue of minors, because we're getting a lot of outside influence from these civil lawsuits that are being filed. And what they said was that, hey, this is not anything really as part of this case, but it should be noted that Diddy vehemently denies any involvement with minors. And I think that's important because the court can consider other relevant conduct, even uncharged conduct, as it relates to bail. And obviously anything relating to minors is extremely alarming, but it also should be noted that, listen, these are allegations in a complaint, and a complaint being filed in court doesn't mean that the allegations in that complaint are true. We've seen civil lawsuits over the years being filed and the cases end up getting dismissed, or the case ends up going to trial and there's a defense verdict. So just because something is said in a complaint doesn't make it true. And furthermore, the government has not at this point made any sort of allegations regarding minors. There hasn't been some sort of superseding indictment indicating that Diddy's going to be charged with anything relating to minors. So that should not be held against him at this time. The last major argument by the defense is that Puff is having a difficult time being able to prepare for his case while being detained. There are over 23 terabytes of information that the prosecution has provided to the defense, and that is so much discovery. It's so much discovery, and it is a hardship. It's a hardship to be able to get to the detention facility to meet with your client instead of being able to do so, in the comfort of your office, or meeting them at their home, or meeting them at a Starbucks, right? It just is, as a practical matter, it's more difficult to meet with your client and strategize when they're detained. But whether that rises to the level of a constitutional violation is yet another story. So the prosecution in their opposition basically said, hey, you're not making any new arguments. We've heard all of these before. You're just rehashing new information and spinning it in a different way. And so remember at the beginning when we talked about that standard, you have to present new and material information on the topic of detention. And the prosecution is basically saying that, if these are just rehashed arguments, then this isn't new information, and so therefore the judge shouldn't even consider any of these arguments. The prosecution, in arguing against bail, reiterated their position that Puff is dangerous, that he was physically abusive towards Cassie, and that he would constantly threaten to expose these tapes of the freak-offs. You can only imagine how powerful that would be in terms of controlling somebody. If you have them in embarrassing or compromising positions, and she's a public figure, had her career, if he were to put these things out there, then that could have been very detrimental to whatever it is that she was trying to do, if not just embarrassing as it would be for anybody. Another damaging allegation from the prosecution is that Puff has been trying trying to reach out to witnesses by way of his children. If you've been watching social media lately, one of his sons had put out that video on IG saying, hey, we're going to be playing a highlight reel of positivity from my dad, playing all this stuff to, throw out good spirit and love. And it's just like, what are you doing, right? Puff has lawyers. I don't know if the kids are represented, but there has to be some sort of advisor out there saying, this is a bad idea. There's nothing positive to come from this. If you're watching some of these videos, it looks really forced. It doesn't negate the allegations. It's just not really helpful at all. And so Puff is being accused of using his family in order to put out positive narratives in order to taint a prospective jury pool. And those are things that you just cannot do. So apparently there was notes found in Puff's cell. There was a jail sweep, and they ended up finding evidence of an unnamed witness being paid. So now we might have evidence of bribing or tampering with a witness. He's apparently been using other inmates' phone accounts to communicate messages. The implication is that he's basically playing puppet master from his cell and being able to get to potential witnesses and manipulate messages being communicated to the public. And so if he's able to do that from his cell, what is he going to be able to do if he's out of custody? And the government ultimately repeated the argument regarding risk of flight. I mean, Puff, at a minimum, if he's convicted, he's facing 15 years in prison. At the max, he's facing up to life. And so somebody who's facing up to life in prison has all the incentive, if they get released, to not ever come back to court, let alone the country. So we really have to look at the court's previous ruling. We know Judge Carter had found that there was no condition or combination of conditions that would ensure the safety of a person in the community, or basically ensure that Puff wouldn't be tampering with witnesses or obstructing justice. And, to find that there's no combination of conditions whatsoever, that's pretty strong language. And so this is what makes it such an uphill battle for Puff, because ultimately they're going to have to overcome that burden. Two judges have already found he should be detained. So I think in the end, this request is going to be denied. I mean, even with this more robust bail package, allegations about you reaching out to your family and having them reach out to other people, and you putting out messages in order to preemptively taint a jury pool, you trying to persuade witnesses into either not testifying or saying what you want them to say, or you're ultimately giving the judge ammunition to deny your bail request. He's represented by a lot of lawyers, very expensive lawyers. I imagine they've advised him against this, and I just can't understand why you wouldn't pay attention to your lawyers in this situation. While you have a request for bail pending, all these new allegations coming out about witness tampering and the like, I mean, it's not smart. But we'll see how the judge rules. Again, my position is that this thing is not going to be granted. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. If you got something out of this video, please show me some love. Hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications so you never miss a new video when it drops. As always, I want to thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace.